Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 201st Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Before we begin, I would like to mention that our panelist, Joe Gaines, passed away a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to miss Joe. Joe was an asset to this program because he brought with him a wealth of experience in the instruction and teaching of communications, and also as an award-winning coach of debate. He has a lifelong interest in current political events, and that he showed a solid commitment to civil discourse, and he's going to be greatly missed on this program. So anyway, today our panel will this is going to be an open discussion, and the panel will engage in coming up with topics of their own. And excuse me just a moment. We've got a problem with our screen there. It was confusing. So each panelist will come up with their own topic that they would like to have the others chime in on. And today's panel begins with Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist. Patty Haskins, former member of the Wadsworth City Council and also a Wadsworth High faculty member, and Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. So Ron, what would you like to share with the panel, and open yourself up for pot shots?
Well, John, when you gave this topic here a couple of weeks back now, that it's been incredibly stressful for me because there is just so much out there. It's so hard to focus on any one thing. And I've got a laundry list here of things that I could have talked about, and little points about each is things like gerrymandering and climate change. And I see a disturbing trend toward trying to establish a theocracy in this country, such things as LGBTQ rights and the Roe v. Wade controversy, which has a sort of male supremacy thing going with it too, which is I find a disturbing trend in our country. And politicalization of our courts. This is going on all the time. And in Ohio, I saw that they're going now to local judges on the ballot will have their party affiliation next to their name, which is an innovation, but I suppose it's a good thing. If they're going to judge in a political manner, it's good to know what kind of politics that they espouse, I suppose. But obviously, the big one is a terrible tragedy that's been happening here in the last couple of weeks, and has been going on for years now, and that's the mass slaughter and the gun control issue. And it is so frustrating and so excruciating to think about this, that I don't know what to do about it. I do not. It's a sociological issue as well as anything else. We have the culture in this country that allows that. Many other countries have successfully limited gun ownership and usage, and things have gotten better. In I think it was 1990 some. Bill Clinton, by executive order, banned the sale of assault-type weapons, and it went down. And a couple of years later, the Republican Congress allowed that to lapse, and there was, I don't know, with Clinton's issue, went to 43% less. When the was lapsed, and it rose by over 200%. Now, I don't know the truth of their statistics because I don't know the source of it, but it is a number out there, and I think we've seen a rise of the mass slaughter issues. And the government just refuses to do even simple things like the red flag laws. I think that's a good one to pursue. The loopholes in gun sales and gun shows and that sort of thing. why not ban the rifles? Why not collect the guns? This has occurred in other countries. New Zealand, it comes to mind. They had a mass slaughter. And they just got the guns, destroyed them, and in several years now, there's been no other instances of this. We have one every 2 weeks, so I don't know what's going on here exactly. Why is this happening? Government does things like stand your ground laws, and don't have to have a permit to carry every concealed weapon. There's House Bill 99 is going through the courts right now, which will arm teachers with a minimum of 24 hours of training in handguns. Now, that's not it's a very complex law. Reading about it just this morning in the local newspaper, in the Akron Beacon Journal, and there are lots of room for interpretations here. It's being rushed through pretty quickly. It's going through the House and go through the Senate and go to Governor Baldwin, who will probably sign it. And it's not thought through particularly well. Many things here. So I'm very frustrated with this. I'm beyond angry about why our government refuses to really try to do anything. The Democrats seem to be standing back and just ignoring it, and the Republicans are just going on with these other things, with arming the teachers. And 2 days after the shooting in Texas, the NRA met. President Trump was there, and Ted Cruz was there, and said, "Okay, let's turn our schools into panic rooms. Let's make them defensible fortresses, and single entries and all that sort of thing going on." But so I don't know what to do with it. It's very frustrating, and I think it's a topic that we need to. I don't know what good it does anymore to do more discussion on it, but because I don't think anything is going to happen for a long time, I personally would advocate, let's round up those guns. Let's turn them into plowshares. Let's melt them down. And let's ban the sale of the magazines. Let's ban the sale of the guns. Let's try to get as many of them off the street as we possibly can. I don't see any reason why not. Somebody planted a meme recently, says, if I see a kid hitting other kids with a stick, I wouldn't blame the stick, I'd blame the kid, but I'd still take the stick away from him. So let's take them away, folks.
Okay. Patty, I share Ron's frustrations. Do you have a comment on his concerns?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I was thinking of two topics, and this, of course, was one of them. First of all, I did watch the hearings on House Bill, was it 99 or Senate
99?
Yeah, the other day, and it was interesting. The legislators in the state were not even listening to people. It was overwhelmingly people that were opposed to this bill. It came out that they really did no research with teachers, with administrators, with police as to whether or not this is a good idea. As a former teacher, I can think of a gazillion reasons why this is a bad idea. And I realize
would you refresh our memories on what that bill is calling for?
Well, what it's calling for is it gives school districts the right. They are not forced to do this, but it gives them the right to have their teachers armed. And they say with a minimum number of 24 hours. I believe prior to this, the minimum number of hours was like 720 or something.
728, I think, was the number that comes to mind.
Yeah, it was a very large number. They're lowering it down to 24 hours. Now, there's also some other training that I think there's like 8 hours that you have to get for just to purchase the gun in the first place. So there is some other training involved, but it is a minimal amount. Now, however, if you think, I think of myself as a teacher, where is that gun going to be kept? Is it going to be on my body at all times? So if someone gets angry with me, they could pull it and shoot it, which, I wouldn't exactly be a fearsome force. Is it going to be kept in a desk? Is it going to be locked up? then would it be accessible if I were to need it? If I have am I to take that gun home with me then, or am I forced then to have a gun at my house? Or do I leave it at school locked up? If there's a substitute teacher in, do they have access to my gun? All these questions have been asked and none of them are being answered. I think there's a rush with this particular bill. I think it is dangerous. It is not well thought out. The only thing good about it is that there is no requirement for school districts to latch on to this and to actually put guns into schools. I find it horrible, however, that this is the only thing affecting guns that is being done presently, because I, like Ron, I simply do not see the necessity to sell AR-15s, particularly to 18-year-olds. They can't buy a drink, but they can go out and buy a lethal weapon. I find this extremely difficult to understand. My little 2 cents. The other issue that I really wanted to discuss, because it aggravates me, and it has to do with gerrymandering and setting up of state districts here in Ohio. The state of Ohio passed a law through election saying that we were to establish fair and equitable voting districts for federal elections and for state elections. And because of partisanship in our particular state legislature, this is not being done. And unfortunately, even though our Supreme Court has gone back and said, I think 4 times, that the bills that the committee has been coming up with are not equitable,
Not constitutional.
they're unconstitutional. A federal court came in and said, okay, since you haven't got it done yet, we're going to go back and accept this one plan that has been deemed unconstitutional. Unfortunately, what that then did was gave no impetus to the Republicans on the committee to make any change. They just waited it out and they got one of their bad plans put in. If you don't think this is a problem, recognize the fact that we're going to have another primary in August, because that committee refused to actually try to act even halfway in a bipartisanship manner. That is going to cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars right here in Medina County to run a special election for the state offices. There is no excuse for this. I am extremely angry about this and very upset with members of that committee that refuse to act in a reasonably civil manner in trying to address what the electorate of Ohio said they should be doing. And
Don't you think the root cause of the whole thing is politicians behaving in self-interest? What are you going to do? What are you going to do about that?
Well, elect different politicians.
Yeah,
you need to do.
Correct.
Unfortunately, that's not happening right
Put the
now.
responsibility on the people where it belongs.
Well, these are the people we've elected, and they've chosen. Yeah, I understand the Republicans on that committee, they have the majority, and they want to make sure that these districts are going to be Republican, but I don't agree with it at all.
Yeah. Bryan, what are your thoughts on this topic? Or you want to move ahead with your own ideas?
Well, I'll just touch base on a couple of those, and then I have some other thoughts. If you go to Maryland, go to Delaware, Pennsylvania, New York State, New Jersey, a lot of the states on the Eastern Seaboard and in California, gerrymandering is called redistricting. And when our friends on the other side of the aisle complain about gerrymandering, they forget about the heavily redistrict states that you'll never have a Republican elected in Delaware or Maryland. If you look at their gerrymandered maps, we just hear about it here because our friends on the other side of the aisle have to put that shoe on the other foot, and they're not happy with that. Now, elections have consequences. Our good friend Barack Obama told that to everybody. Elections have consequences, and they need to get their people out to the polls. And if they want to turn a gerrymandering situation into a redistricting, which is really the term that most people use, and that's what they use in Delaware. They don't talk, the Democrats don't talk about gerrymandering in Maryland. They talk about redistricting, and we want to make sure that this is fair and open and all that kind of stuff. And the folks on the other side of the aisle, my Republican friends, are screaming gerrymandering in Delaware and Maryland and Pennsylvania and New York. So, you know, it goes with politics. It's a political issue. Unfortunately, you know, it is what it is, and you have to change it at the ballot box. Second thing is, I'm just as upset with what happened in Texas, and I really want to reserve judgment because there's so much information coming out about that. Our schools have single point of entry. We have school resource officers that the city and the schools participate in to have an officer that is armed in our schools. Having that SRO in our schools is an effective deterrent against any kid or adult that decides they want to walk in and start taking pot shots at people. We have single point of entry. Now, this is not what the answer, what a lot of people want to hear is because, well, how do the kids get out? Well, the door opens both ways, okay? You can't get into one of our schools during school hours without going through one door, okay? I went up to pick up my grandson. You got to go through one door at Isham, Valley View, Lincoln, Franklin, one door. And that secretary sits behind hardened glass. Nobody's going to bust it. Nobody's going to shoot through it. You know, it's that glass that you see at the drive-through, the bank teller that sits there, okay? It's a pretty good thick piece of glass. Let's start investing some of these things in our schools, and then let's start talking about these other things that we can do to minimize sick people that get a hold of guns. These young men that were involved in these shootings in the last several months came from very dysfunctional families. And that's really the topic I'd like to go into is what are we going to do about the disease, not just the symptom, but the disease of you know, single parent families. Kids are being raised without mothers or fathers. They have no, you know, they're just basically raising themselves, and they're whipsawed around by everything that they see on social media. And next thing you know, the kid is out there doing stupid things. In each of these instances, when you look at the latest one, the one up in New York, the one down in Texas, you know, these young men are troubled. And there have been studies, countless studies. They have studied this problem. They have sounded the alarm years ago that there's a generation of young men that are being raised without any father, without any male influence in their home. Now, I don't want to take away from that single mom or that single dad. They're doing their very, very best to raise their children. But it has proven, the data is in, the statistics prove it, that young men that are raised without a father are at a disadvantage. They are at a disadvantage in our society today. And I think that's what leads up to these crazy, horrific things that get in their heads. But I don't think the knee-jerk reaction of trying to collect all the guns or trying to limit this or limit that, and you know, these little, we nibble around the edges. Let's really focus on what is creating this problem. Now, I also bring up that we haven't heard anything about, and I haven't heard anything about the man that drove the car through the Christmas parade in Waukesha. He killed 6 people. Some of them were kids. He put 60 people in the hospital, some critical. We don't hear anything about that. Nobody's talking about pulling SUVs off of the thing. You know, I saw this thing online where they said, you know, to get a car or to get a gun, you should go through exactly what you need to do to get a car. I would agree. There needs to be a stronger background check for mentally ill people. There needs to be training and all that kind of stuff. But the fact is, it didn't stop that guy from driving his SUV through a Christmas parade. And you're going to see more and more of this when crazy people, and I would dare say that guy was raised in a fatherless home. I would bet an Ann's cream stick that if you looked at the background of that guy, that crazy guy that was radicalized, and it doesn't make any difference whether someone says it's BLM or Q or whatever, that was radicalized, that he thought it was okay to drive his car around barriers and to mow down 66 people, killing 6. So let's start and let's attack the root of the problem. And then let's start maybe tightening up some of these things. But let's not do the knee-jerk reaction of saying, well, it'll solve all our problems if we just collect all the guns. That will not solve the problem. Those bad people will get guns no matter where. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, well, every time there's a shooting, well, whether it's in a mall or a school or whatever, a mass shooting, number of people get killed, then the politicians go into their litany involving gun control and so forth. And up till now, at least, it's always faded away. Give it a few weeks and it's off the news and so forth.
One thing as well, let me just add this. In every instance, these things take place in a gun-free zone.
They got signs on the doors that tell you.
The signs on the door say you can't carry here. You can't. I would dare say that if you put up a sign that said you're welcome to come in here and carry, that would be that's like that fake. My house is protected by ADT. Most of the homes don't have it. They just put the sign up, and that's enough of a deterrent because nobody, let's not break into this house.
Yeah.
But this notion that somehow.
My concern is that we have all of this attention whenever there's a mass shooting, but then every weekends especially, in big cities, more and more people are murdered with handguns. And the major media does almost nothing about that. The politicians don't talk about it. I remember a few years back, probably more than a few, there was an idea, a motion, whatever, to raid Caprini Green in Chicago because the cops knew the place was loaded with illegal guns, but they weren't allowed to go in and into somebody's apartment looking for a gun without probable cause, and so that was left. There are tons and tons of illegal guns in the in large cities. We do nothing about that, and they kill people on a large scale. I guess I'm concerned about why we are more concerned about a white guy killing a bunch of white kids than black people killing each other and on a large scale. That's a bit. Go ahead.
I don't think it's.
Pardon?
Said it's called white supremacy, among other things.
Yeah, and I don't think it's that, John. But my concern is that yes, we can look at fatherless homes. We can look at all mental issues. We can look at at making schools difficult. But every single time, and we've had 3 large ones in the last 2 weeks, there is a shooting like this. The response from Republicans and conservatives is that don't look at guns. It's a knee-jerk reaction. It's not. It is something that has been looked at and looked at and looked at. But there is a failure in this country to recognize that too many guns can be problems. All you have to do is look at every other country in the civilized world. They have mental illness. They have fatherless homes. They have all of these issues, but yet they don't have near.
Well, let me add this.
The latest number I heard was
because we have more guns in this country than we have people in the country.
400 million is the latest count.
Let me say this. There was a study. If you take out Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles, as far as gun deaths and mass shootings, we rank number 67 in the world. Finland had a mass shooting. Were that crazy? They have taken guns away from people in Finland and the Nordic countries for years. And that guy was armed to the teeth. He went out to that island dressed as a policeman, sick as can be, and killed how many people? And
A
none
lot.
of those people out there. How many?
There
There
were
was
a lot. I don't.
A lot. A lot. So
Hundreds.
this notion
We're
that
having
somehow
one of these every week, every week. And I'm sorry, I cannot watch another scene of a school where 10-year-old children are shot by a maniac that never should have had a gun in the first place, who had absolutely no need to own an AR-15 and 1,500 rounds to fire. Why are we allowing that to happen?
Well, I'll tell you this, he couldn't carry 1,500 rounds. There's no physically.
He
I mean,
purchased
it's
that
horrific.
much though, Brian.
It is horrific that happened. I'm right there with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
But the notion that he couldn't take that truck, that somehow he had a relatively new truck and plow it into a playground of kids, could have just has happened. Okay. Just like the guy up in Waukesha, just like the guy in Brooklyn that took his car and plowed it into the Republican center, killing 3 people. We've got to do something more than just say taking guns will solve the problem. It won't.
You know
It
what?
won't.
I'm willing to look at all of the other stuff, but look at it. At least discuss it instead of saying that it's out of this. We shouldn't even be
And
discussing
you know what?
it.
I'm right there
I'm
with you.
tired of that.
I'm right there with you. And the
Yeah.
person that sits in the Oval Office has been in government over 50 years and has had more mass shootings on his watch over the last 50 years. And he has done nothing about it because he comes from the state of Delaware, where he knows he has to dance on the head of a pin to get elected because the people in Delaware, being Democrats, don't want that to happen.
Yeah, well,
So,
folks, I
I
we ought to
mean, this
talk-
notion
we
that
ought-
somehow it's just Republicans doing it. We've got
No,
people on
we-
the other side of the aisle that could take up the cause.
Yeah, let's look at the votes in the how many Democrats voted one way and how many Republicans voted the other.
Bill
No.
Clinton
We're not
Clinton
gonna.
had
we're
both
not
the
gonna
House
pull
and the
that one.
Senate and didn't do a thing.
Okay,
What happened to Governor Wise
hate
red
to-
flag laws after Dayton? What happened to that? What
What
happened to
what?
the other things they had? The red flag laws. You know, you're talking about mental illness and crazy people. You know, what happened to that in the Republican legislature in Ohio?
What happened to
it?
that was the
Died
ACLU
completely.
sued. The ACLU sued because they're discriminating against people that might have some sort of a mental health issue. And we emptied out all of the mental hospitals and emptied out all of the facilities because we can't
Right.
have these people be disadvantaged. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it is a very complex, sticky problem,
course
but
it
I'm
is.
just not into the
Okay.
knee-jerk reaction of,
You folks realize that we are well over time. by now.
Yeah, and I have an appointment in
Joanna's going to
20
cut
minutes,
us off, so I will say goodbye to you all for the moment.
it's good to see you, John.
See you in 2
And you,
weeks.
Patty, and Ron as well.
Good to see you folks
Yes.
too.
I love you all.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.